Wow, standing room only, I'm impressed. I know you're all here because you're just so anxious to hear us talk about the ethics case of the year. It doesn't have anything to do with the fact that you need ethics credits, does it? Oh, okay, well, anyway, we'll try to make it as interesting as possible, as painless as possible. I've been doing the ethics case of the year at the chapter meeting, I think ever since the AICP committee started doing the ethics case of the year. And I am pleased to have on my panel with me today, Ray Chiramonte. You may have seen in the program that Mary Kay Delk was going to be here, but Mary Kay and Michael, I believe, are still traveling, and so I called Ray, and he agreed to be with us. So we're happy to have Ray Chiramonte and Val Hubbard and Sylvia Vargas. So we're going to talk about ethics. Why do we need to talk about ethics? I need to review with you sort of a refresher on planning ethics and what the code of ethics entails and involves. It's a requirement for you to get your credits. We need to talk about ethics itself before we go into the ethical scenarios. Up until last year, the committee came up with one particular situation, and they built on that situation or that scenario throughout. They had different aspects of that. And then last year, they started having different scenarios that talked about different situations with ethics, and that's what they've done this year. So these are the scenarios that are part of the ethics case of the year this year, dealing with employee ownership, soliciting donations, spousal job conflicts, personal interests, political involvement, public to private sector, and sports tickets. So you can imagine what kind of ethics situations those topics may entail. And we'll see as we get into it. So first of all, why talk about ethics? Why is it important that we consider ethics? And of course, we have ethics in everyday situations as we have to make choices and we have to make decisions that we're confronted with different things, and there are situations up here that you may be able to relate to somewhat, I don't know. But ethics means different things to different people. And so it's important that we all have a common understanding of what our ethic responsibilities are and what ethics really means to us as professional planners. Distinctions between right and wrong, they aren't always clear. It's always black and white. And so it's important that we understand our code of ethics so that we're able to make those choices and decisions as we're confronted with different situations. And where that line between right and wrong is blurred, it often can result in an ethical dilemma that we find ourselves in, and having to really maybe consult the code or even consult the ethics officer at National in terms of getting some guidance. And then it's important, I think, that we develop attitudes so that we have an attitude towards ethics 24/7, so that as we're faced with situations every day in our job or in life, that we're able to know what to do sort of second nature to us and not really have to struggle with making those decisions. Citizens have a right to expect ethical conduct in the planning process. I mean, I think we would all agree with that. If citizens come to meetings, they come to sessions and so forth, they have a right to expect ethical performance and conduct, particularly on the planner's part. Professional planners have ethical responsibilities to those that are mentioned here. AICP planners must practice in accordance with the standards of practice, including the Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct. Planners are guided by both local and sometimes state ethical provisions, but frequently none exist. And planners must exercise common sense, especially with consideration given to the guidance of the aspirational principles that are in the code. And then finally, access to resources and helps are available through APA and AICP. And this session gives you a way to access some of those resources in case you have doubts or you need to know, well, what does the Code of Ethics really require in this situation, or what would it require? And we find ourselves in this environment oftentimes, and that is ethical judgments often requires a conscientious balancing based on the facts and context of a particular situation and the precepts of the entire Code of Ethics of Conduct. So is it right or is it wrong, or does it depend on the circumstances, which is what where we find ourselves oftentimes. So I passed out some of the copies of the Code of Ethics. Unfortunately, I didn't make enough copies for everybody, but if you have a smartphone, you have access to the Code of Ethics. And so if you can, we'll go to the planning website, www.planning.org/ethics. It will take you to the Code of Ethics, or to the ethics section on the website. And that particular page has the ethics code, the AICP Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct, with links to the revisions adopted April 16. The Ethical Principles in Planning, which is a guide for everyone who participates in the planning process. It has reference to the Ethics Case of the Year, Ethics Planning Toolkit, and the AICP Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct. So you have that at your disposal anytime you need to access it, and that is where you can get it. If you select the first hyperlink on that page, it's the AICP Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct. It has the different sections of the code, and those sections are in the handout that I gave you. Section A is the principles for which we aspire, which is the responsibility to the public, clients, employers, employees, and professional colleagues. Then Section B is our rules of conduct, which is the 26 rules which AICP members are held accountable. And then advisory opinions is the next section. Complaints of misconduct is the next section, and then discipline of members. Ethical principles in planning. There are those principles that are listed there that requires us to serve the public interest, and I won't read all of those, but they're listed there. Maintain high standards of integrity and proficiency. Improving planning competence. So there are 2 seats up here up front. Anybody wants a seat? I see a seat over here. Seat back there. There are a few seats around. If you were to scroll down under ethics and planning to actions regarding ethical conduct, you'll see there the process or the procedure to file a complaint on ethical misconduct, which can be filed by anyone, but only against an AICP member for having allegedly violated a rule of conduct. You're able to seek advisory advice from the ethics officer, non-binding and not in writing. And the ethics officer is Jim Peters, which is his contact information is listed there. And you can seek an advisory opinion from the ethics committee, which is provided in writing, but only on selected unresolved issues. There is also a section that you can go to that will provide the form if you wanted to file a written complaint on an AICP planner regarding a potential ethics violation. In 2017, FYI, there were 19 ethical misconduct cases. 10 of those 19 were dismissed. 9 were settled. 5 were for misuse of AICP credentials. 2 were for confidential letters of admonition for Rules of Conduct 25, wrongful act for both of those. 1 was a 1-year suspension of an AICP certification, and 1 was the revocation of an AICP certification for a serious crime. And then just to look at the ethics cases and inquiries, of course it's up there, but what would you think the most common occurrence of an ethical inquiry would be? And that is a conflict of interest. Is the most common occurrence, followed by loyalty to employer, respect for confidentiality, honest and fair dealing, legal and ethical conduct, quality of practice, private communication, abuse of position, false, deceptive statements, lack of cooperation with ethics, and misuse of AICP credentials. So, that gives you an overview of the ethics code and some of the situational cases and inquiries that were made. Ethics Case of the Year, which was created by the AICP Ethics Committee in order to provide general education materials regarding the AICP Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct. So it's a way that the committee felt that it was good to use these cases, and these are real cases. They really happened. So it's not something that was made up, although of course the names are fictitious and the places are fictitious. But the situation is real. And then you can direct any questions or queries or suggestions regarding the case of the year to the ethics officer. Again, these are true stories. The scenarios are based on real situations, and this just gives you sort of an indication of where those occurred. They're derived from informal inquiries or actual cases of ethical misconduct. It features 7 different cases, which I've already gone over with you. Here are the cast of characters that we'll be talking about as we go through the code or the scenarios. So, Ray, you got the first one.
I think I need to stay.
Okay.
I'm too short to see half the group sitting. Okay. Well, the first case that we have involves a gentleman named Patrick, AICP, a consultant. He's been offered a position as planning director in Gettysville, where his firm currently provides planning services. He's interested in the job, but he also owns stock and has interest in a consulting firm, which he hopes to retain to help pay for his kids' college tuition. He doesn't want to prevent the firm from continuing to work for Gettysville, since it is one of the few planning consulting firms in the area. So this kind of sets the stage, and you can see where there will be some issues. So we have a question, and I'm going to try to get some audience participation. If Patrick takes the job with Gettysville, can he still retain his employee stock while allowing the firm to pursue planning contracts with the city? My reaction was, "Are you kidding me?" Lots of pieces to our code of ethics regarding that. So pretty much we have a universal agreement. This probably wouldn't be a good idea. These are some of the principles that would deal with this issue. We shall pay special attention to the interrelatedness of decisions. We shall deal fairly with all participants in the planning process. Those of us who are public officials or employees shall also deal even-handedly with all planning processes participants. We shall exercise independent professional judgment on behalf of our clients and employers. We shall avoid a conflict of interest or even the appearance of a conflict of interest in accepting assignments from clients or employees. We shall protect and enhance the integrity of our profession. More. We shall not, as salary employees, undertake other employment in planning without having made full written disclosure to the employer who furnishes our salary and having received subsequent written permission. We shall not, as public officials or employees, accept from anyone other than our public employer any compensation, commission, rebate, or other advantage that may be perceived as related to our public office or employment. We shall not perform work on a project for a client or employer if, in addition to the agreed upon compensation, there's the possibility for direct personal or financial gain to us, our family members, or persons living in our household, unless our client or employer consents in writing to the arrangement. We shall not use the power of any office to seek or obtain a special advantage that is not a matter of public knowledge and is not in the public interest. We shall not fail to disclose interest of our client or employer when participating in the planning process, nor shall we participate in an effort to conceal the true interest of our client or employer. This is another thing. This seemed clear to me when I first looked at it that this was not a good idea. I don't know if anybody has any opinions or insight they want to express on it, but it appears that there's a lot in our code that deals with this type of issue. And to me, he needs to sell the stock or get out of the company. So that's it for Patrick. Anybody has any questions? If not, we'll go on to scenario 2.
I'm also going to stand because I can't see all this side of the room and I want to see your faces. So before we start, I just want to do a plug-in and add something to the resources that Merle pointed out as the AICP Commissioner for Region 3. I have to do this. But you may have seen an email from APA perhaps that mentioned the new wonderful, downloadable, and printable certificate of ethics, the Code of Ethics. And I recommend to everybody, it's really easy. You print it, you put it in a nice little frame, and you hang it in your office. Make sure to sign it and date it. And it's great. So that's part of a marketing campaign that the Commission has launched recently to better market the value of the AICP credential to our employers, to our elected officials, and to the public in general, because it is really important. I think that's what distinguishes us from other professions and from other planners. We have to abide by the Code of Ethics. So with that said, let's see what happens with Jane. Some of you who may have been in the audience last year may remember Jane. She keeps getting in trouble. So, as it turns out now, Jane, who is now a senior planner with the city of Jacobsville, I don't remember where she was last year, but she's a graduate of planning program in her state, and her school's alumni group is raising money to create a scholarship fund. Great. So that's all nice, but they have asked her to actually solicit donations from consulting firms in her city, many of which she's working on projects with. So, what do you think? Special advantage. Special advantage? So, what do you think that she should do? And if anybody has some ideas, for those of you who have the handouts or maybe looking in your phone at the Code of Ethics, if you would venture a guess as to which principles and rules of conduct may apply, I'd love to hear your opinions. Oh, come on. Come on. Can you hear me? Okay. All right, let's go on. Let's talk about what the problems are. So one thing that she could do is actually suggest that somebody else, perhaps somebody who is in the private sector, who is also an alumni from her school, or maybe a retired planner who wouldn't have the kind of conflict, would take that that responsibility, right? So these are the principles that we have kind of figured apply in this case. We shall have special concern for the long-range consequences of present actions. Not what I see as a kind of related to that principle. We shall pay special attention to the interrelatedness of positions. We're not creating the possibility of quid pro quo. We shall deal fairly with all the participants in the planning process, especially those of us who are public officials or employees. We shall avoid a conflict of interest or even the appearance of a conflict of interest in accepting assignments from clients or employers. And we shall protect and enhance the integrity of our profession. And then, there's more. We shall not, as public officials or employees, accept from anyone other than our public employer any compensation, commission, rebate, or other advantage that may be perceived as related to our public office or employment. And we shall not use the power of any office to seek or obtain a special advantage that is not a matter of public knowledge or is not in the public interest. With regards to, let's see. There's a second question that comes up. So if Jane, as a member, she happens to be a board member on her chapter, if she is asked, if she asks those same firms or planning schools to help sponsor the state planning conference, would that make a difference? What do you think? This one's a little bit more sort of on the gray side, right? Who thinks that she can do with no problem? You do? Back there? Who thinks that she should? All right, and the rest of you don't know what to think?
What was your second question? I didn't understand your second question.
The second question is, it's kind of a second hypothetical. She is a member of the
I
chapter board.
understand that,
Right.
but you asked who was in favor, and then you said something else. I didn't understand.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said no. I didn't say it was in favor. I just asked who thought that it was okay for her to ask for help from private firms to be a sponsor.
Thank you.
Right. And there was only one hand that was raised way back there. We're going to talk. And then I asked who thought it was a bad idea. There were a number of hands raised, but the rest of you did not raise your hands. So I'm kind of wondering where you stand on that.
I didn't understand the question. Thank you.
Okay. Well, now that you know what you
I'm
think,
opposed to it.
you're opposed to it. Okay. Yes.
So we are at a planning conference and we do have sponsors.
We
and
do.
I have helped put on 2 conferences, but I was not part of the
Sponsorship committee.
Sponsorship part of it. We have something in place, otherwise we wouldn't have sponsors. I mean, it's not like they're going to figure out all of a sudden that there's a conference.
A conflict.
Unless they're members, and many are probably members. So what is the process that we have in place that allows us to do this?
I myself have participated in helping organize 2 state conference, but I was also not part of that effort. So I'm not sure. We can find out what the steps are. Now, the answer that we have to this particular question here is that because she is with the public sector, she may also want to request a chapter to have somebody in the private sector be in that committee, the sponsorship committee, to do those requests. Or again, find somebody who's retired who may not have those same kinds of conflicts, right? So we have on this page also a series of they're basically the same.
Well,
Yeah.
I just want to, I guess the aspect of this that makes it wrong for her goes to her position as a public employee and
Correct.
her asking for potential or asking consultants who she has a relationship with. If she were in that position and asked consultants that she doesn't have a relationship with, I mean, would that make, that's a little bit different twist on it, would that make it all right? Because I've been on the chapter board before, and I have appealed to people that I know, say, hey, do you ever consider being a consultant that I have no relationship with whatsoever? But I've asked them if they would consider, in fact, I was a consultant before and asked my own firm, hey, we need to step it up and we need to be a sponsor. But I think the heart of it goes to her relationship with those firms. And if that's a professional relationship, particularly if they relying upon her for the work that they're doing, then that relationship puts her in a vulnerable position to have violated the ethics. If there's no relationship whatsoever, then I think that it would be okay.
What do you think? I mean, let us assume that this is a small town and you have a limited universe of these firms. You don't have a relationship with some of these firms now, and I think that goes to the first and the second principle on this page, the interrelatedness of decisions and the long-range consequences of actions, because in the future you may actually have a relationship with those firms do you think that presents an issue?
So the firm would think, oh, well, if
Do you
I
remember
voluntarily,
when
I'll be a
we-
sponsor,
yeah,
and then
yeah.
she will then reciprocate by me agreeing to be a sponsor by giving us the next job that comes up.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. We go on. These are from the rules of conduct, and I think they're the same as were on the previous set of slides. So, from the ethics case of the year perspective, the rules that apply to the first question related to Jane in this situation are the same that apply in this case. But I even thought of a couple more that when I read the code, I thought may apply. And I don't know if you want to take a look at them and let me know if you think that I'm right or not. But it was rules of conduct number two and number 13. So I don't have them up. I don't have them in front of me right now, but you can take a look at those. And in the meantime, I'm going to pass this on to Val.
So that last one is kind of thought-provoking. I know of situations where planner friends of mine in, I think, really good conscience have gone and done that kind of solicitation. Sometimes the amount of money they're able to collect that way kind of shows that some of those consulting firms maybe feel a little bit of pressure from being approached. I just wanted to mention something. I worked for a law firm and have for the last 11 years, and our law firm had a project with a city, and there was a fund in memoriam of a very good friend of mine who worked for me when I was at the city. And of course I wanted to give to that fund, but the fund was being collected by the planning department. And I just was worried about it, and so I got in touch with the ethics officer at the time and was told, no, you shouldn't be giving to that, because it could look like I was giving to, even though this was a close friend of mine, it could look like I was giving to it to curry favor with the city. Now, stuff like that might not get you brought up on charges. So, you're kind of distinguishing between what are the principles, the aspirational principles versus the actual rules of conduct. Yes.
In that instance, could your significant other make that contribution?
I guess it'd be real clear where it was coming from. What they told me was if the city could put,
get somebody else to collect the money, like say the regional planning council or this university that the person taught at also, that it could be okay that way, but it was the direct connection to the planning department that made it look bad.
The one way that I think that's been handled in the past, though, where you do it anonymously.
Yeah, why can't you do it?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it could be anonymous or not. I guess maybe it could be.
Because the issue is the known potential
Yes,
conflict.
right.
So
Right.
Anonymous removes that.
And so if you can make sure you're remaining anonymous, then, but the planning department was kind of the one collecting the money, so I guess I could have, I don't know, no cash.
With regard to this particular case, I mean, on the principles about appearance of conflict, I agree with that, but I don't think what she would do is a violation of either one of those. She's collecting money for a scholarship fund. She's getting no personal
Right.
advantage. So number 5's out. And then number 14, what special advantage is she obtaining? None. So I don't see where what that scenario is a violation of either one of those rules.
And that may be the case. I mean, that's what I was trying to say, is there's a difference there between aspirational principles and the rules of conduct, and you can violate one without violating the other. Yes.
If I might, of course, I respect your point of view, we all have one, but I would suggest at least in 14, we should not use the power of any office. I think sometimes as a planner, director of department, or even a lower level planner, others will suspect, I think, that we have power to influence actions that come before the municipality or at least that department. And I think, I'm not sure how that's 14 was intended when it was written by whomever in the committee, but it sounds like we shall not use the power of any office. I think that also includes the implied power of the office. Personally, I think the planning department or whoever it was should not have been seeking memorial. I would guess the family or a club that the person belonged to or something like that.
It would have made it a lot easier, that's for sure.
And I think in where you work, the smaller your jurisdiction, the more chronic and the more sharply felt this is. I'm a planning director in a small city, and this has wide-reaching implications for me, because if I were to ask someone that I meet with all the time, an engineering firm, an architectural firm, a developer, to assist in funding something, anything, a city project or anything, then they're going to feel pressure just because of my position to help, and then try to remind me that they helped somewhere down the line. On the other hand, I can't ask any of these people to assist, like when my kids' ball team is selling this or that, the other. Because of my position, I don't get on any fundraising, so I buy all the tickets when my kid comes home with them. Because, I'd rather do that than have anyone feel that I owe them because they've helped me out with something. And I don't want to be put in that position where they feel like I owe them because they helped do this thing that I asked them to do.
Yeah, and I think you're bringing up a good point, and this is something I was the chair of the ethics committee in the past, but I'm on the ethics committee still, and it's something that, as we look at these scenarios and stuff, you realize there are different situations based on jurisdictions. Now you're pointing out in a smaller jurisdiction, there's such closeness that it might be even more uncomfortable. I also hear on the other side of it, and this is the one I'm about to get into, we had one sort of like this we were talking about, where, on conflicts of interest, if you're in a small jurisdiction and there's only a certain number of consulting firms there and everybody knows everybody and everybody's friends with everybody, and so, when you start trying to avoid the conflicts of interest, it becomes harder to avoid them because there's not a lot of choices, there's not a lot of people on the staff who can take on some of these other things. So let me get into this next. The next scenario has to do with spousal job conflict, scenario 3. Let's see. So Harland, AICP, is the planning director of Bartholomew. His spouse, also AICP, is a transportation planner with a consulting firm that has submitted a proposal to the city to prepare a corridor transit study. The firm's attorney says there are no ethical concerns provided the spouse does not work on the study. Okay, you got that? So, is the attorney's opinion consistent with the AICP Ethics Code? Okay, why is it not consistent? Pardon? Oh, benefit to you or your spouse. Okay, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So that's one issue, and it seems like a conflict of interest. I mean, there's some kind of benefit coming in, right? What about, are there any precautions that should be taken? Suppose they decide to go ahead with this based on the attorneys, and of course, asking the attorney is critical, right? Why? Why is that important? Pardon? Oh, you went to that presentation this morning, yeah. Yeah, and I work in a law firm. I love it. You know, I've always got an attorney there. But something else, yes.
Well, you're moving towards disclosure and full disclosure, and you want to make sure also first that if you're going to do it, that the employer gives it to you in writing that it's all right.
Yes, and also remember it could be against local laws or customs, right? So you have to make sure, first of all, you're not going to violate the law, and attorneys are good for that, right? Or should be. Okay, so what precautions should be taken during the interview process, if any?
Neither spouse should be present.
So stay clear. Obviously now the we don't know if it's a male or female spouse, but the spouse is not gonna work on the project, right? That's what they said. But even though the spouse is not gonna work on the project, is it okay for the boss to be part of that interview?
Certain criteria, because generally the contracting you agree, the local government agrees on the criteria that's going to be used in the hiring process. So, in my opinion, he could be part of the, establishing certain criteria that they agree upon, and maybe not even that much, but, sometimes you need an expert there to establish the criteria, but from then on, it's.
Did you hear what she said there, that usually you come up with criteria, points or whatever, that you're going to award the project to whatever firm, and he could possibly be a part of that, but probably shouldn't even be there in doing that. But at any rate, as part of the interview, it would be ideal if he were not. Now, this is again where you get into some of those situations like a small local government where suppose he's the only person that knows what you need for this project, then, at a minimum, it seems as though he shouldn't be the person deciding, right? Maybe input, maybe help ask questions or something like that, but you definitely want to have some precautions taken. And a lot of this, you're taking it as far as you can to avoid the conflict or the appearance of conflict. And it's not necessarily always going to be perfect, but that's your objective. So if the firm is selected, what precautions should be taken?
She's not supposed to be working on the project, that's.
Or she's not supposed to be working on the project. What else could go wrong? Yes.
Again, get a disclosure, written approval from both bosses, I would say.
Written approval from both bosses.
There's the community and the firm.
Right. Okay, so the community and the firm. How about some people out here? There's you think something else, right? Come on.
Neither one should work on the project.
Neither one, of course, should work on the project, right? What about you see any possibility that them talking to each other about the project might create some issues. I mean, yes.
Well, he shouldn't even be part of the process at all, not even to review the project. Because he may bias, the selection or the approval, and then at that point, it's a house of cards falling down.
Okay, I like what you just said there about a house of cards falling down. That kind of leads us into the next sort of some of these ethical issues, okay? So, remember we've been talking on all of these about the interrelatedness of decisions and the long-term consequences of our, present actions. If these people aren't careful about what they're doing, it could lead to a lack of credibility in the selection process and challenges, delaying the project because it's been challenged. Could lead to a lack of credibility in terms of the substance of what's been done. People saying these people really weren't the most competent to do it, and so we questioned. And then there's the issue we were just talking about. If they're talking about it offline and it appears that he's being influenced in some way as this project's moving forward to be more favorable to decisions the firm might want to make, then that's a problem too, right? So the house of cards thing, I think, is a good point that you're making. So there's that. There's dealing fairly with all participants, exercising independent professional judgment on behalf of our clients or employers, not because your spouse told you to do it. Avoid conflict of interest, okay, and protecting and enhancing the integrity of our profession. A lot of this stuff that, the aspirational principles, one of the things that relates back to many of the things you shouldn't do ethically, it's like just the integrity of the profession, right? Because people need to be able to, as Merle said earlier, count on us. They need to. I've had people since I've been in consulting actually call me up and I go, "Why did you call me? I don't know this person." And they said, "Well, I saw you were AICP, and I knew that if you're AICP, you're going to have integrity and you're going to be ethical." So I think that says something really good for us. So then going to the
Val,
yes,
before you move on, may I just say, since you were if you were on the previous one, to me, this is kind of an impossible situation for them, because even if they didn't violate any of these principles, I think there's always going to be the potential appearance of a conflict, no matter how you do it. Even if particularly if it is a small town, because everybody's going to know that he's there and she's at the firm, and it doesn't matter. I think that they probably should not even go after the project.
and ideally, again, we're talking ideals. You stay as far away from this stuff as you can. The problem that we see at the ethics committee is that, a lot of small town planners are like, I gotta be realistic, it's life. So I'll do the best I can to avoid a conflict, an appearance of conflict, but if that's all it is an appearance, then I may have to move forward. So those are those real life situations that, ideally you're avoiding them entirely, and in reality, it may not always be possible. You definitely need to avoid the actual conflict of interest and the things that, are gonna get you into trouble. So as far as the rules of conduct go, of course, the rules being the things that will get you in hardcore trouble. We shall not perform work on a project for a client or employer if, in addition to the agreed upon compensation from our client or employer, there's possibility of direct personal or financial. Oops, sorry. Did I go too far?
Yeah. So you were pressing on it.
Oh, geez. Okay. There's the possibility of direct personal or financial gain to us, our family members, or persons living in our household. But you can, if you fully inform your employer and you get it in writing, as this gentleman was saying, then this is not an issue. Okay? So from a rule of conduct perspective, it may still be an issue from an ethical perspective and from a parent's perspective, but that's the way you cover yourself if you have to move forward with it. the other one, we shall not use the power of any office to seek or obtain a special advantage that's not a matter of public knowledge or is not in the public interest. So again, it's like there's sort of caveat at the end, if it's the public knowledge and if it's the public interest, but who's to say that, right? So you just have to be careful. Is there anything else on that one? If not, we'll go to the one that I've zoomed through without looking at.
Just a quick question, so you now have, the firm employed, okay, and the spouse working. If that firm were to contribute additional, were to make contributions to the organization in the form of food, resources, other things, is that one step further? I mean, in terms of an ethical conflict?
Why would they do that?
Just.
Yeah, I think if the firm then starts doing other things that appear,
Over above the contract.
yeah,
It would have the appearance of also being a problem.
yep, sounds like you have something in mind there. Anything else? Are we good? Yes, sir.
What about rule 8 and 9, since this is a spousal
Okay.
situation?
Let me look at 8 and 9. Do you want to read them to us? Or here, can you hand me that over there? Okay, so 8 is, we shall not as public officials or employees engage in private communications with planning process participants if the discussions relate to a matter over which we have authority to make a binding final determination, if such private communications are prohibited by law or by agency rules, procedures, or custom. Yes, and that's what I was talking about, talking to each other. But yes, if all of these things are the case with respect to that communication, that would be a violation actually of a rule. If, on the other hand, it's just they're talking and she's having some undue influence, then it may not clearly be a violation of rule, but may be a problem. And then you said 9?
Yes. and it's-
Yeah, we shall not engage in private discussions with decision makers in the planning process in any manner prohibited by law or agency rules, procedures, or custom. Again, you're right. Yes, those are two relevant things.
What
as
about
well.
13? What about 13?
The team doing that?
13.
Oh, 13. Let's see. We shall not sell or offer to sell services by stating or implying ability to influence decisions by improper means. So that one relates, that could relate if this firm were to, if somehow there was the implication that because the woman's or man's, we don't know, the spouse's husband, is working there, if they somehow tried to influence decisions or get business that way, that would be a conflict. So yes, situationally, of course, yeah. Any other thoughts on that? So, I mean, a lot of that just relates to the fact that she's, even if they didn't have, I guess, this contract coming up, that would relate particularly if she was trying to get business for her firm in general because her husband is the planning director. And that happens. I mean, if somebody, I'm sure people talk about that stuff. So, all right, thank you.
Alright. So on to the next. You very quickly kind of saw these slides go through, but now we're gonna be dealing with Catherine in a situation of personal interest. And Catherine is a planning consultant, and she is kind of looking to purchase a strip of land that is next to her own property where she has her home. And she wants the strip of land so she can create a buffer between herself and the neighbor's proposed development, which we'll later learn that is some sort of commercial use. So as full or partial payment for the buffer strip, she offers to help the property owner, get their rezoning application. However, the owner doesn't want to sell her the land, and then she decides that she's going to testify as a private citizen against a proposed rezoning application. So in her testimony, she goes ahead and cites the negative impact of the commercial use, the impacts that it's going to have on her property. And of course, the neighbor then objects that Catherine has used her professional knowledge and her status as the city planner to further her own personal interests.
She's a consultant.
She is a consultant.
Oh,
Oh, does it say the city planner?
Yeah.
I think they mean city planner as the, urban planner, city planner, not, but her work is as a consultant, yeah. But thank you, good catch. We'll make sure that they fix this. So here's the question. Has Catherine violated any aspects of the AICP Ethics Code in her actions? Oh yes, everybody's agreeing? Okay, so, can we talk about how many things are wrong with it? I'm not gonna say what is wrong, but how many things are wrong with this? Yes,
She was for the proposal when it benefited her personally and against
Clearly.
it when she didn't get her way.
Right. That's a pretty, or at least it looks like a pretty clear-cut case, right? Anyone else has some thoughts about this one? Yes, back there.
I mean, if she was trying to purchase the property at fair market value, I didn't hear that. She's now working for the local government, and her consulting firm doesn't have anything to do with the basic development. Then is it technically an issue, maybe a little bit of gray area, then is it technically a violation of the amendment? If she had nothing to specifically gain, she was trying to protect her own property.
Right, and I think the language there may be a little deceiving because it states that she is a planning consultant, but she's actually acting on her own behalf. She's not acting for her firm. She's trying to buy this piece of property to protect her personal property, right? But she's using her skills, her expertise, and her knowledge to. Is that a fair assessment to understand that Yes.
She could have got the same outcome, but not even, I guess she wanted to get a better price for the property, but she still could have got the buffer just by coming up as a private citizen and objecting to it.
Maybe.
Well, that may have been worse, because that disowner then would have been compensated for the buffer.
It would have been required because the screen requirements between residential and commercial, so we got it anyway.
That I guess that is possible. We don't know the details of their code, but it's possible that there would have been a buffer requirement that would have gone into place, and we don't know. There's no detail there that says that she wanted to get an extra buffer, perhaps, and I think that may have been the case. But it would seem like in any case, for being a planner, she actually may have had some better understanding of the implications of the commercial development going on that property next to hers, maybe? Do you think that can be true?
I'm having an issue with this scenario because for me, if she had just tried to buy it and not proposed to
repay,
repay it using
by helping the
exactly
being a facilitator.
Very clear cut.
Yeah.
Hey, I want to resolve this by I will not, and she didn't even have to say whether she was going to object or not. She just could have said, hey, I know you're going through this. I would like to buy this extra piece. Yes or no. That is one transaction. Right. A very simple. He said no. That's fine. But that doesn't preclude her right to go to public hearing and oppose the development. The problem was then that gray area.
It's like
where
she's
she
retaliating.
says, now I would like, I'm offering you my professional services in exchange for this. Then she starts getting into problems.
Right.
Because if it had been clear cut on both sides, then it's her right as a citizen.
Right. And if she had offered to pay for the property and he had turned her down and she had shown up at the hearing to object as a citizen, do you think that that's still the same situation, or
She has rights as a citizen.
As a
I don't
citizen,
see why
yes.
that would be preclude her rights to show up in the hearing unless she is the one that's going to be processing that application somehow because her firm works for the city. I mean, there's many cities that have firms that work for them in the private sector,
Right.
but they are the city planners.
Okay, all right.
And that would
Yeah.
be helpful.
Yeah. And again, like Val said, a lot of it is, situational, depends on the jurisdiction and a lot of the details of the situation that we don't know, whether she's a consultant that works in that jurisdiction, whether she works for developers, she works for, maybe this is one of them, or, some of those things we don't know.
I
Yes.
just wanted to add one thing though, that unfortunately being in a situation like this, that reflects poorly on the company you work for.
Yes.
So that's where we need to be careful because that's our employer. And do we want to put ourselves and our employer in a situation where there's now a big question mark about, who am I representing?
Right. Because
Myself?
it's hurting your credibility as a professional,
Right.
and therefore it could reflect on the credibility of the company. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Sylvia, I think what she just said is kind of related to this issue of, moonlighting without your employer's consent, because one of the reasons, of course, for that is to avoid conflicts between your employer.
Correct.
And so if she does something like that and reflects badly on her employer, it's kind of the same type of problem.
Right, and nobody has actually mentioned the fact that we don't know whether she works for a company or for herself, right? She could be a sole proprietor, but that she did offer to help this person with their application. And if she does work for somebody else, is she doing that as part of a job that she's offering? I mean, it's very likely. It sounds like it may qualify as a moonlighting, right? So yeah.
I would say moonlighting, you only get into that if there's an actual, some type of action here. There's no real action. What concerns me a little bit here is an offer to actually do that, but the other end of that was never agreed upon or went forward. And although you may think it's critical to take the reverse position, I've been struggling to find really one that I think fits in here. I looked at 13 a little bit, I looked at some others, but they're either already having a client-employer type relationship or having already accepted, having completed that action. So I'm going to be really interested to see what you come up with.
Okay.
I'm struggling to find one that I think actually fits in there discreetly. Val did mention about reflecting on the profession, and there is sort of a catch-all towards the end of the code that you might get into that a little bit. But this is an interesting one in terms of where it obviously crosses the line.
Yeah. Does anybody have any other guesses as to which principles or rules of conduct may have been looked at in reviewing this case? Anybody wants to venture a guess? No? Okay, well, thanks for the segue. Let's see. Okay, so the issue is that Catherine, as we said before, may have called into question her own professional objectivity by testifying as a planner in support of her personal interest. And she also may have learned the roles of private citizen and planning consultant because of that first transaction that you talked about, right? So these are the principles that were looked at in reviewing this particular one. 1C, which, as you kind of put for the integrity of the profession, it's also a catch-all looking at the interrelatedness of decisions. 2A, we shall exercise independent professional judgment on behalf of our clients and employers. But as you said, that kind of implies a relationship. 2C, avoiding a conflict of interest or even the appearance of a conflict, protecting and enhancing the integrity of the profession. And then for the rules of conduct, number 7, we shall not use to our personal advantage information gained in a professional relationship that the client or employer has requested to be held inviolate or that we should recognize as confidential, because its disclosure could result in embarrassment or other detriment to the client or employer. What do you think about that one? Again, kind of thinking of the context.
Yeah, again, I don't think there's a client-employer
Yeah,
relationship yet.
I think that's the issue.
And I'm not sure what the information that we have is supposed to be held confidential
Yeah.
to be involved, so I'm
Yeah.
not sure it's 7.
I'm also having a little bit of trouble seeing how this one pertains, but and then number 25, we shall neither deliberately nor with reckless indifference commit any wrongful act, whether or not is specified in the rules of conduct that reflects adversely on our professional fitness. I think that one I can see.
The only problem, the
But
question I have there is
She's advocating for her personal property, so
Yeah.
how is it, a wrongful act by saying, this is, she was, on some level, she was trying to act as a property
As a
owner.
property owner.
So
Yeah.
as a planning professional, you can't defend your rights as a property owner?
No, I agree. I think the problem, again, and we're kind of looking at the entire scenario, right? With that first part where she went to the property owner and said, hey, I'll help you do this if you, give me part of that property to protect my property from the development that you want. I think that's what begins to create the, yeah. Right, yes.
Well, yeah, I don't know that someone working for compensation that's not cash in itself, as long as you're still, representing your client in a professional and ethical way. I think what's perhaps a real important nuance here is assuming that every step of the way she had full disclosure, right? Like at the public hearing says, okay, blah, blah. I think a nuance that we don't know in this case is that she was looking to get a 20-foot buffer, right? To add to her own property. So she actually, so let's say the developer says, well, I'm not going to hire you, or, the value of the property is way more and I'll take care of it myself. And let's say he's going through some kind of zoning, like a plan development, and as a condition of approval will provide a 20-foot buffer, which is the same 20 feet she wanted.
Right.
At that point, if she comes to the hearing and objects, now I think clearly it's being driven by money, not by planning principles.
Right,
But
yeah.
the fact that she wanted a 20-foot buffer to protect her own personal interest, and it's something that, as planners, any of us might propose to a developer, like you need to provide a 20-foot buffer. So there's a nuance in the case that we don't know.
Correct. And I think that, these cases don't give you all the information because we want to steer the conversation around these areas which are kind of difficult sometimes to determine without a lot more context, but that's the point, right? Yes.
The more I look at it, the more I see that it seems like there's a violation of an aspirational principle, which is 3A, but I can't find a true concrete violation of a rule of conduct that based on what the scenario is that is actually happening.
Well, and I think that, as Val said before, there is the possibility of, kind of stepping over the line with the principles, but not getting in trouble with the rules of conduct. And
I think
perhaps-
there used to be an APA question that we sort of get into about the 3-year issue and about someone that supported a buffer of a certain length and 5 years later supported much less and was on the outside private consultant. They may be a hypocrite, they may have other things like that, but you didn't violate the rules of conduct. I sort of feel that way about this. There's some things that are in conflict with aspirational principles like 3A, but not explicitly on the rules of conduct.
Right. So it may not get you in trouble with the rules of conduct, but it may step a little bit over the line in terms of the principles, is what you're saying, right? All right, well, unless unless there are any other comments on this one, I know that Ray really wants to talk about the next one, so I'm gonna pass it on to him.
Okay, political involvement. Some of you know why I'd be interested in this. I'll tell the rest of you immediately. This is about Dan, a planning director of Hudson County. He's been offered a leadership position in a local political party. Dan's boss, the county manager, does not think this is appropriate. She discourages him from being involved in any formal way with the party. And she notes the code of ethics of the International City County Management Association has, opinions on this type of situation. I'm going to ask you this question: is the county manager correct, and are political activities not allowed by the AICP Ethics Code? What do you think about that? Just kind of, I will tell you, in my role as planning director of a number of agencies, I always told my staff not to get involved in anything political, and to, really not even let people know what party you were and things like that. I didn't really think about the AICP Code of Ethics and what their opinion might be on that. I just probably assumed that they wouldn't think that was a good idea. I don't know. What situations have any of you had with this type of thing? Yes.
I just wanted to say that the county I work for clearly hasn't stated in the employee code that, so it just clarifies that issue for the employee to begin with, that you are not allowed to openly, participate or run for office while you're working for the county. So just one way of dealing with it.
Yes.
The reality is politicians are petty and vindictive. They pay attention to who put what signs in yard, they pay attention to or who makes campaign contributions. And so as a public employee, you're better off not doing any of that.
And any other opinions?
Not all politicians are identified with those descriptions, in my opinion.
All right.
I have a question.
Yes.
I mean, perhaps I can see where it would be unhealthy to be involved in political issues if you were in the public sector. I'm not sure I see an ethical problem if you were in the private sector. I see a risk for sure, and it's a question of intelligence. But I'm not sure I see risk.
Well,
An ethical.
I think what you're saying probably has some validity between the private and public sector, because obviously a lot of planners in the private sector might be more politically involved.
And I mean, it depends on what activity. I mean, I know we're talking generally. What activity does that mean? You can't make a contribution? Is that an activity without actually actively, promoting a candidate or a cause? So.
Well, this is the rule of the ICMA. Some city and county governments that I was mentioned have rules about this, whether they have members or not, to adhere to the ICMA Code of Ethics. And what they say is refrain from all political activities which undermine public confidence in professional administrators. Refrain from participating in the election of the members of the employing legislative body. However, to my surprise, really, the AICP code does not prohibit political involvement. Nonetheless, as we've talked about, it may make sense to notify your employer. And I still think that individual agencies could have rules. I don't remember if we had a written rule to that effect, and I suspect we didn't. It was just advice I would always give employees, including myself, to be careful of that. And again, we have three things that might be kind of related. We shall pay special attention to the interrelatedness of decisions. We shall accept the decisions of our client or employer concerning objectives and nature of the profession professional services we perform unless the course of action is illegal or plainly inconsistent with our primary obligation to the public interest. And we shall contribute time and effort to groups lacking in adequate political resources and to voluntary professional activities. So these are the only things kind of related to this. Now I'm going to tell you my personal experience. My first experience with doing something that I should have known was a bad idea was an employee that I had's spouse passed away, and somehow within 6 months she decided that she was going to run for county commission. And I'm thinking, this is her kind of working through her grief of this. So for the first time, I gave money to a political thing. Well, her opponent found out. I remember somebody came down and said, "Ray, you were getting cussed out on the second floor. How dare you give money to so-and-so's opponent?" And he made my life miserable for 4 years. Every time I was in front of the board, it actually kind of backfired because the other board members are really not getting why he's always giving me such a hard time. He'd say, "Why aren't you doing what I tell you?" And I go, "Commissioner, I am doing exactly what you're telling me to do." But anyway, so that just reinforced that. However, coming to the end of my contract 3 months ago with the Tampa Bay Area Regional Transit Authority, I was really concerned about the level of political discourse and got this crazy idea that I had thought about most of my life that I should run for county commission. So I asked the attorney if that was a conflict to keep the job, and he said, "No, there's nothing in your contract that says you can't do that." However, with one day of announcing and what happened to me, it's called drinking out of a fire hydrant. You realize that you can't do that. It would be physically impossible if you were going to adequately run for political office and still have a full-time job of any type, let alone one that's kind of politically related. The other thing, I'm going to give credit to all planners, because our values and our code of ethics are so on a different planet than anything related to politics. And I worked with elected officials for 35 years, but I never really knew, I didn't know what goes on in the party and committee meetings and what they look for and all that. I walk in naively thinking, hey, I've worked, with both sides, they don't even know what party I'm in. They're probably going to be surprised when they find out. And thinking that was going to be an asset. And the look that I got was like, are you nuts? They're the enemy. We want to destroy them. We're not about working with them. And it does cause me concern. And as you can imagine going through this, I did lose in the primary. There were 4 opponents. I was the wrong product. I was the sedan and everybody's buying SUVs. And the SUV this year is to be really mad and, want to kill the other side and make them pay, which I get. I feel that way sometimes myself. However, my idea was, we need to move ahead and make the community better, work with everybody, get everybody involved. That is not the message right now. I'm hoping it becomes the message again, but it isn't the message right now. And the things that people tell you to do when you're in this type of situation are just, I actually started quoting the ethics that I was a planner, and this is why, I'm not going to do this. I mean, you're immediately told, well, you can't say, if that's your opinion, you can't say that or you're not going to win. I go, what do you mean? I said, well, this is what I believe. I'm going to say this. But it's just such a different world. And it was shocking because working with elected officials in the doing of their job is very different than running for office. There's all kinds of, from petty things like people going out stealing signs and things like that, and or telling you that you have to. Nobody wins unless they have 8,000 yard signs, and I got a printer that's going to do that for you. You need to go through or you need to advertise in these different papers. You need to have a family picture on the 4th of July and this newspaper, or you're not going to get their endorsement. And oh my God, it was like, So I'm really glad I'm a planner and I didn't violate any of the ethics. Of course, I lost the primary, but it was really an interesting, eye-opening experience. I actually thought of opening a counseling service for planners running for public office to really tell them what they would have to do if they really wanted to win, because they might have second thoughts. I guess I'm not sorry I did it because it's out of my mind now, and I can't imagine that I would do that again. But it does point out that our profession does have the highest ethical standards, and some, areas of government that we deal with don't have any ethics at all. And the ethic is whatever you can get away with. It was basically the ethics. Yes.
Excuse me, but I've ran for public office and been elected, and also been defeated 3 times when I was running. And I'm retired, by the way. I'm not working for any public agency. I have my own company. I did not run when I was working for any kind of public entity. Also tried to keep I many times did not vote in a primary, because some states, you vote in a primary, everybody knows which party you're in. So all that said, many of the people I've worked with are, excuse me, sir, but totally different from you and what the gentleman in the back said earlier. I think many politicians that I've met know on both sides of the schism, whatever you want to say, are really trying to improve the community and the country or the state, whatever they're going to.
I totally agree with you.
But I think you need to have someone on your commission, on your committee, who actually either is willing to say something like that. I think you need to be civil, and speak honorably of some politicians. I'm not saying all. That's my thoughts. Thank you.
No, I agree with you. It's not, I can tell you, we all got along, the 4 people running in my primary, we never did one bit. There is a system, though. There's a system in the parties. It's not the politicians. When you're running for office, there is a whole structure within the party that they decide who they want to run. And if you decide you're going to run and you don't ask their permission, they're not happy. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. It's the structure, not the people running. They were good people and didn't really do any of those things, but a lot of stuff went on, especially on the other side between the people running, doing like fake pictures in Facebook. One of the things that I got in trouble for is that 4 years ago I gave to somebody $25 that wasn't in the party I was in. And that was considered by the party to be almost disqualifying me from running. How can you run? You gave that person money and they're from the other party. So not the person running, it's the system. I gotta tell you, if I could do it, I'd wipe out both political parties. If we're doing this, it's gonna take me a while. We need a third party or we need something else, but what we have now isn't gonna work.
Let me ask you, has there been any discussions on the committee about amending the rules to address political involvement? Because that seems to be a pretty big area that I'm surprised the code is silent.
Yeah, the question up here was, has there been any discussion on the committee about amending the rules to deal with political stuff? And actually, there is some discussion right now about possibly amending the rule, revisiting the rules kind of in general to look at, there are things that aren't covered in the rules, like social media stuff, and things have just changed a lot over the years. So I'm not going to tell you we're absolutely there, but we're talking to the commission, and I think there may be, we've amended the procedures when I was the chair, but the rules haven't been amended in a long time. And I don't know, how many of y'all looking at those rules kind of go, they're a little strange? Yeah. I mean, in the sense that they get so specific, right? Like this thing about within 3 years you can't espouse unless you do this and that and the other, and hide something under your pillow or whatever. But it's there's this sort of tension between having something that's specific enough that people know when they're going to get in trouble, but having it general enough that it covers situations. Like we look at some of these situations in these scenarios and we go, that doesn't seem right. But then you struggle to find something in the code that really where you'd ever be able to be brought up for any kind of sanctions on it. So those are the kind of issues. We're gonna do one more scenario and then I think we'll probably be out of time. So, Jane, AICP, retired 6 months ago as a planner with the city of Jacobsville. A developer whose projects Jane formerly reviewed as a city planner asks her to work for him on a proposed mixed-use project in that town. So Jane checks with the city attorney, who says there are no laws restricting the employment of former employees. How many of y'all have no laws restricting the employment of former employees? My experience is in Florida, there's usually like a 2-year window. At the state level, there is, I think that applies in a lot of the local governments. So I know when I went to private sector, that was the case. So the question is, should she accept the job offer? And if so, what, if any, concerns should she have under the ethics code? So put yourself in this position. Do you think, first of all, should she accept, or not should she, I mean, clearly there may be other things, but should she be able to accept the job offer? Okay, so she should be able to, okay, so let's say she goes, this sounds pretty good. What do I need to be careful of as I take this job? Changing your position, there's a rule on that, it's the 3-year rule. You can't, if you publicly espouse one thing, you have to wait 3 years before you publicly espouse something else, unless I think that you get written dispensation, I think is the way it goes. Yes.
I think it might be at least very interesting for the planners she worked with previously to review her work. Would they be able to review her work objectively?
Mm-hmm.
Or was she over them? Was she their employer? Did they like her? Did they hate her?
That's why most places have that 2-year rule. Because the revolving door, the idea is that you can't be objective on that issue, on reviewing stuff that your former, it's the respect.
It doesn't say where she was in the hierarchy. It seems to me that might be
possible issue.
choose an advantage or disadvantage depending on your perspective.
Right. What else might there be?
The offer came in from a company that was just working on a project that she happened to be on.
Okay, so she doesn't work on it anymore, right? But they may think she has undue influence. Also, should she be careful about working on projects that she already worked on? And one of the reasons for that is because of this 3-year thing. So if I worked on a project and I said, this is a good wetlands, right? And then I go with this firm, they go, we want you to say this isn't good, that the indicators are it's degraded. Then you're putting yourself in a bad position, right? Because you're not gonna be able to do that. And just the appearance of conflict of interest. I mean, the public's gonna look at it and say she worked on that. So why is she working on the other side now? We're in the flag hat. Other issues? Yes.
Did she have any insider knowledge?
Yeah, insider knowledge in the local governments. You kind of think, should there be any insider knowledge in local government? But there could be something there. She could have learned something from a competitor to the firm she's going with that she maybe shouldn't divulge.
I'm going to turn this around a little bit because I've found myself in situations where the project is coming through because I, as a planner, have to look at my comprehensive plan to see, or the zoning code to see if the project is consistent with either our policies or with our code as it's going through. So that's right there, there's no conflict. I'm looking at often there is a good project that staff has written, it is consistent because you don't have an opinion. It is consistent with their goals and objectives and policies and consistent with their zoning code. There's no issues with it. Gets to the board or the council and it gets shot down.
Right. So can anybody hear what she's saying? You found it consistent, okay, you're working as the local planner, you found everything consistent with the comp plan, zoning code, all that. And it gets to the board and it gets shot down.
So now, let's just use that scenario, there's no problems with, I am interpreting wrong. Now the person retires, she's on the other side, and somebody comes to her and says, you know, would you work on the project, let's try again, maybe the commission changed, maybe something changed in the process, and this is just a good fit, to move it through. It might be that they're just hiring her to do the outreach because she had good rapport with the community. I just wanna hear it from that perspective.
Okay.
How is it viewed?
So she's saying, let's say that you as a planner thought it was a good project and you recommended approval, but the council or the commission shot it down. So now this person hires you and wants you to work on that project. Is there a problem given the fact that, you know, now maybe they're trying to get this project through again and maybe there's different commission or council, maybe they just think time is right, maybe they think there's a different way to get it through. Is there a problem with you working on the project for them and espousing, it's essentially the same position you espoused when you were working for the local government? Does anybody see a problem with that?
Well, I just know that in our world, you can't work on a project that you worked on, for the government.
There are rules sometimes, and that's what I was talking about is some places you wouldn't be allowed to, but does anybody see as long as there are no laws, which he's kind of said, is there an issue with that in our rules of conduct or aspirational principles? You'd still be saying the same thing you said before, and I think you just have to be careful because there are a lot of places there are rules that you're not supposed to work on it from the other side.
If you're a high level person, then there are more rules. But if you're not a high level person, then if you did work on a project, you can go to work with somebody that you worked with.
Yeah.
But you can't work on anything
That you worked on before, right? So here's the answer. So this is saying as long as there are no local or state laws, she should consider it, but be careful of potential conflicts of interest, and gives the principle on conflict of interest and even the appearance of a conflict of interest. And then for the rules, that's the 3-year rule, okay, that you really you cannot espouse a different position unless you make full written disclosure and get their permission. And then the other thing is we should not use our personal advantage nor that of a subsequent client or employer information gathered that we knew to be that we should recognize confidential. That came up over here. And I think that's it for this one, and I think we're at time.
I'll just go through this real quick. You're supposed to be here, an hour and a half to get 1.5 credits. So I'll go through this real quick. No one's ever been in this position, have you? A private utility has offered Harlan, AICP, the planning director for the city of Bartholomew, a ticket to one of his alma mater football games. Bartholomew's planning department has never had a review role regarding the utility or any of the properties. Consequently, Harlan believes there is no problem in accepting the tickets. Is Harlan correct? Are there no AICP Ethics Codes concerns in accepting the tickets? Are there any situations in which Harlan could accept the tickets? What do you think? No? No and no? Yeah, Harlan should not accept the ticket. However, there could be some situations such as those involved involving a close friend where he could attend the game while paying for the ticket. So then there's a AICP rule of conduct number 5, number 14, and we are out of time.